Okay, so welcome to IBA 614 Global Marketing. This is our 8th session. And in this session, we'll be looking into global market selection. Now, as usual, there are certain learning outcomes we hope to achieve by the end of the session. Today, there are 3 of them. The first one being to define international market selection and the determinants of foreign market choice, as well as to explore how international marketers screen potential markets and countries using secondary and primary data criteria, and then to distinguish between the different approaches of global market expansion. Let me quickly fix that. I think the F did not appear. Okay, there we go. So I'll take that again. The learning outcomes include 1, to define international market selection and the determinants of foreign market choice. 2, to explore how international marketers screen potential markets/countries using secondary and primary data criteria. And then 3, to distinguish between the different approaches of global market expansion. So let's begin. We'll start from global market selection. Now, international markets can be combined on 2 main bases when it comes to, can be defined, on 2 main bases when it comes to international market selection. First of all, in selecting markets, firms can define international or global markets, first of all, as a country or a group of countries. And we have determined this in several of our previous sessions where we noticed that several global marketers try to group their foreign markets in terms of region, or perhaps combine 2 or 3 countries on a given continent to be able to make sure that they serve that combination or group adequately. However, apart from grouping them based on country or putting together 1 or 2 countries, they can also decide to alternatively look at the international market as a group of customers with nearly the same characteristics. So they would not necessarily take them in terms of geographic context, but they would look at the specific nature of the customers that exist within the countries in these various geographic contexts. So in that case, we realized that we can have customers who are being served by a particular firm who do not necessarily come from the same geographic region, but could come from 1 or 2 or more geographic regions, but however are bound together by the characteristics that they share in common. So when it comes to global market selection, firms would either go in to categorize them in terms of country or groups of countries, or to look at them in terms of a specific group of customers that share similar characteristics. And this is essentially the starting point from which global marketers look at their international market selection. Now, once they have been able to determine which basis they are going for, whether in terms of geographic region or by customer characteristics, they then go on to look into the specific determinants of their selection. Now, when it comes to market selection, firms decide the basis on which they want to select the market. However, they have to go further to be able to look at the nature of the choice of their market based on what they feel they can handle and what they believe they cannot handle. In the beginning of our course, we learned about the environmental factors and the unique effects that these have on the decisions and strategies of global marketers. At the same time, we also appreciated from the beginning of our course that not all firms are created the same. Hence, they have different characteristics and resources and competencies that may either enable or hinder them from taking advantage of specific global market opportunities. So research done by the Uppsala School on internationalization of firms, which we heard a lot about in our previous session, also came up in addition to their recommendations for the Uppsala internationalization theory. 2 main characteristics that firms need to look into when they are selecting a global market to do business in. And these characteristics include 1, the characteristics of the firm itself as an organization, and then 2, the characteristics of the environment within which they are operating and doing business. So let's go deeper into these 2 characteristics. Now, when a firm is choosing a foreign market to operate in, we just established that they look at their characteristics as an organization, as well as the characteristics of the environment within which they are operating. Now, in terms of market selection, when it comes to the firm, there are certain important characteristics that they have to look into. There are a number of them, but these characteristics we are going to talk about should be pivotal on the firm's agenda. The first one and most important one being the degree of internationalization and overseas experience that they have. And this is a very important factor because we have learned from our previous sessions that the international market is a very volatile place. And if you do not have any prior experience, either directly or indirectly, in dealing with customers in foreign locations, it becomes very tricky for you to just up and say that you are going to sell your products that you were currently selling in your domestic market to customers in this foreign market. So experience or degree of experience in internationalization and overseas marketing activity is very important when it comes to a firm choosing a foreign market to operate in. A second very important resource that they need to also consider is the size and amount of resources that they have. Now, if you are a firm and you know what your strengths are in terms of resource endowment, you let that guide every single decision that you make, because you cannot afford to take on any duties and responsibilities that would overstretch your resources, or that your resources are not adequate enough to help you take advantage of. So apart from the level of experience that a firm will have when it comes to internationalization and overseas marketing, they also need to consider the size and amount of resources that they have to be able to effectively take advantage of this international opportunity that they have identified. Also, the firm needs to look closely at the type of industry and the nature of the business within the industry that they are operating, both in their domestic market and in the foreign markets they wish to enter into. Because as we will learn very soon, the nature of the industry and the degree of competition and the kinds of firms that are operating in that industry will to a large extent determine whether or not the firm is well positioned to take advantage of the marketing opportunities they have noticed in that foreign market. So the nature of the industry and how it is made up in terms of the kinds of firms that are currently operating in that industry in the foreign market, as well as the level of competition and the resource endowment of these various firms that are already operating in that market that the firm is seeking to enter into, will all play a key role in determining whether or not the firm selects that particular market to enter into. Another thing that the firm needs to pay close attention to is their internationalization goals. Why are they going international in the first place? And this is a very key thing that determines the difference between a firm choosing a market that is of close proximity to a market that is of high proximity, or to a market or between a firm choosing a market that is of low psychic distance and a market that is of high psychic distance. Because as we all know, firms undertake various strategies for different reasons, expecting various outcomes. So when it comes to internationalization, it's the same. A firm may be going international because perhaps the local market is too saturated for the product that they are currently selling, and therefore they are looking for a new place to be able to sell the excess that they have. Or they believe that they have a unique product that is worth selling in other markets where they can get perhaps higher returns of their investment. Some firms will also go international perhaps to benefit from what we call economies of scale. So there are different goals with which a firm would want to go international. And depending on whether the objectives are largely motivated by downstream or upstream motives, the firm has to be able to let this guide them in terms of the markets that they select to enter across the globe or in foreign locations. And then finally, another important thing the firm needs to consider is the existing network of relationships. Because as we learned from the network theory in our previous session, there are certain markets that you may never be able to enter without leveraging the resources and capacity of the players within certain networks. So the firm needs to be able to consider the markets that they are going to enter into in relation to the networks that they currently belong to, and how these networks can facilitate their mobility from their current domestic market into these foreign markets. Now, moving away from the firm and its characteristics, Yes, Saliu, please come in.
Yeah, Doc, where would you fit management expertise in as a determinant that the firm needs to have before thinking of going into management? And then secondly,
I'll put it under,
that,
I think I will place it under the size and amount of resources. Because expertise comes about as a result of human capital, right?
yes,
And human capital is a resource.
yes.
Good. So I'll place it under the size and amount of resources.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then second, is there a model that would sort of rank all these determinants in terms of let's say a preference where a particular firm would need to have a vast degree of, let's say, capability in the networking and relationship area than in all the other determinants, or it is
I
firm
don't know of
specific?
any such model because personally, I believe it will be difficult to come up with such a model because a number of these factors and their level of importance and relevance will be industry and sector specific and also be case by case based. So, for instance, a firm can be deciding to expand into a particular market where the markets that they are going into, they have a lot of experience in operating in that market. So experience in that market may not be an issue. It may come down to perhaps the level of resources that they have, or perhaps the existing network of relationships that will help them to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. So given that it is on a case-by-case basis, there is no model that we can develop that will be exhaustive, that will tell us the different permutations of which one should be more and which one should be less in all the different scenarios that we could come up with. So at this point, we do our best to introduce you to the various factors that you need to consider. So as a global marketer, it's up to you to look at all the different factors that could influence the market choice and influence your subsequent success after you have chosen that market to operate in. So once you know all the factors and you are able to consider and weigh the various elements and which ones will be a plus and which ones will be a deficit, you, depending on the case that you have in front of you at that point in time and the nature of your circumstance, will be able to determine what you need more of and what you need less of. I hope that makes sense, Sally.
Yeah, very much, Doc. Thank you.
Great. So for instance, you can decide that perhaps you are looking at the firm card. That is why as part of your assignment in market selection, I asked you to look at the firm characteristics that motivated the specific company that you are looking at to choose that particular market. Because by the end of the assignment, after we discuss it, you will realize that the characteristics of the firms that made them choose specific markets will differ depending on the industry that they operate in, or depending on the foreign markets that they had opportunities in, or perhaps other scenarios. So I really look forward to that discussion. In fact, we are supposed to have that discussion on the last lecture, which is, I think, on 31st July. Please, am I right?
Yes, Doc.
Yes. So we are supposed to discuss our assignment on that last day. And these are some of the things that we will be discussing. So I hope when we get there, it will throw more light on the various permutations based on the companies that we chose for you to see perhaps at a glance how it played out with regard to which ones were more important for certain firms in their context. All right, Sally. Onyx, please speak up. Onyx Ajay, your hand is up, unless you didn't have anything to say yet. Okay. All right. So Saliu, I hope you're okay with that.
Yes, very okay, Doc. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So moving away from the firm characteristics, let's now talk about the environmental characteristics. And here we are looking at the characteristic of the environment within the host country. And first of all, you need to ask yourself, what is the structure of the international industry that you're planning to enter into. I remember in one of our sessions, we looked at the structure of the paper industry in the US using the Porter's five forces to be able to ascertain the nature of the environment within that industry for any firm that was entering into it. And that in a nutshell captures what we are supposed to be doing here with regards to the international industry structure. You need to be able to look at who the major players are, what are the forces that are at work in the industry, and most appropriately, we can use the Porter's five forces to determine the extent and nature of competition within the industry, as well as the sheer size of the industry. How many firms are within the industry? Which ones have the largest market share? All these things will help you to be able to get a good appreciation of what you are getting yourself into in terms of choosing that market to sell your products in. Next, you are saying, could I kindly elaborate on the degree of internationalization and overseas experience? Okay, so going back to that point, which is under the characteristics of the firm, what I wanted to say there was that in terms of degree of internationalization and overseas experience, some firms get to learn about selling in overseas markets by different means. Sometimes it's as a result of the networks that they belong to. For some of them, it's as a result of doing certain sporadic forms of export that gives them some degree of experience in the market, but not full extensive experience. And we know that based on the Uppsala model, when firms decide to go international in stages, they start with lower levels of commitment and then advance into higher levels of commitment. So when they are engaging in the lower levels of commitment in terms of international marketing, they gather certain forms of experience and knowledge as they go along. So it helps them in the long run to be able to increase their levels of commitment and become better at selling in these markets, should they decide to put in more resources into marketing their products in the foreign market. So it is very important for a firm to grade the degree of experience that they have with regards to internationalization and selling overseas, because the amount of knowledge you have with regards to the market will to a large extent determine how well the strategy that you put together will lead you to success once you begin to operate in that market. Okay, Onyx, thank you. All right, so back to the environment. We said the international industry structure is something that you really need to take cognizance of, because you are going into an industry that already has some players who have some level of experience and have covered much ground with regard to selling the customer base in that market. So an appreciation of the industry structure in the host market is very important to help you to be able to understand who your major competitors are and what the nature of competition in that industry is like. Are there barriers to entry and exit? Is there intense rivalry between existing competition? How is the supplier power like? How is the customer power like? All these things are supposed to guide you to be able to know what it would be like to sell in this market and to go up against these firms who are already operating in that market. And having this knowledge will help you in doing so many things with regard to your global marketing strategy, from segmentation to determining even the kind of entry mode that you choose, among others. So knowing the structure of the markets that you are entering into and the specific sector or industry within the international markets that you are going into is very important and pivotal to your success. Now, you also need to think about the degree of internationalization of the markets that you are entering into, in the sense that you want to know how many international firms are already operating in the markets that you are entering into. And that also, to a large extent, will determine the strategy with which you decide to approach selling to that market. At the same time, too, there are other host country characteristics that you need to consider, including market potential. Is there really potential for your product in that market? Is there a customer base that is ready and willing to pay for the product that you are going to sell? You need to really ascertain this. And then once again, what is the level of competition in the host country? How does the competition look like? Is it aggressive or is it not so aggressive? Are the competitors having a substantial portion of the market share, or there's still a large portion of the market share that has not been won over yet that you have an opportunity to obtain once you enter the market? These are things you need to consider. You also need to think about psychic and geographic distance. like we said in our previous session, psychic distance may not always be the best predictor of whether or not your product or service will do well in a particular market. However, it is worth considering because in most cases, countries that are of a lower psychic distance are easier for firms to do business in internationally than countries that are of a higher psychic distance because of the added costs that it brings to the firm's operations in that foreign market. Likewise, geographic distance. It is easier to be able to get services and products from, let's say, Ghana to a country like Togo or Nigeria or Burkina Faso to sell than to take it all the way across from here to, say, a country like Morocco because of the geographic distance. It will bring its own level of cost implications as well as other issues that we need to address. So considering psychic and geographic distance from the home country to the host country is also very important. At the same time, market similarity, which is somewhat an extension of psychic distance, is something that you need to consider because the higher the level of this similarity between the home market and the markets that you are going to serve, you need to be able to do more research to be able to find out what the market needs are. And in the event that the market needs of that customer segment is different from the segment that you are already used to serving in your local market, there's a higher level of adaptation that you need to do to be able to serve the needs of this new markets that you are trying to enter into. And all of these things, like I mentioned earlier, come with its own cost implications. So once you consider your characteristics as a firm, as well as the characteristics of the environment in the host country that you're seeking to enter into, the two will come together to help you to be able to appropriately conduct your international market segmentation, which will ultimately help you to be able to select the specific markets that you want to enter into. So let's look into the process of international market segmentation and see how it plays out. But before then, does anyone have anything they need clarification on or any question they want to ask before we proceed?
Yes, Doc.
Please go ahead, sir.
Please explain the psychic distance.
Okay, so psychic distance generally has to do with the level of proximity or otherwise that a country has with another country in terms of the language, the lifestyle, the culture, the value systems, among others. So for instance, in terms of psychic distance, when we compare Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, will you say we have a high level of psychic distance or a low level of psychic distance? Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire?
Low.
Low, why?
High level.
They speak French, which we don't understand, and their francophoneness is very different from the way we, the English-speaking people, behave.
Great. So what you are describing is a high level of psychic distance.
Okay, yes.
Meaning that there's a huge good.
Doc, it's
Yeah.
low.
Why you
Low,
say
low because although we speak different languages, our culture across the borders are almost the same.
okay?
Most people in the Nzema are related to the other people across the Nue River.
Okay.
So our characters are the same.
Okay.
And it cuts across through all the borders. All the borders.
I disagree.
Okay. But that means that, Mr. Samasono, you are looking at a particular segment because when you move closer inland, the characteristics begin to change. Because as you come inland and you move away from the border, you are getting towards the central region, Greater Accra, Ashanti. Do you get it, Mr. Samasono?
I get you.
So in terms of that particular segment, you are very right. The psychic distance is low, right? So that brings up a huge issue that even in terms of psychic distance, you can't look at it in terms of geography. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you may be misleading yourself if you look at it in terms of geographical boundaries. Because even within the geographical boundaries, there are certain groups or segments of customers that share similarities with certain groups in other countries, which we mentioned in the beginning. So as global marketers, it is very important to notice that even in terms of the cyclic distance breakdown, you can have specific segments that are cyclically low, have cyclically low relationship with other segments in different countries, and vice versa, right? So thank you for that discussion. It has really brought up a very important point.
Yeah, please, can I try and state an example?
Please go ahead, Chief.
Okay, so can we say Germany and America, they have a high cyclic distance?
You can.
In,
generally speaking.
Overall.
Generally speaking.
Generally, but we can say that maybe a product from Germany may have a low cyclic distance with the American.
Cyclic distance is not determined.
Like,
cyclic distance is not determined in terms of product. It's determined in terms of customer characteristics.
Okay. Yes, yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Good. So if there's a product in Germany that appeals to a certain group of customers, and when they bring it to the US, it appeals to a similar group of customers there, we can say the cyclic distance between these two customer groups is low.
It's low. Okay. Thank you so much, my Dr.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, Doc.
Please go ahead, Dela.
Yes, I'm writing on a similar thing. I want to know with these determinants, who proposed them? Because I have one that I made reference to, that is Sacre and Jordan, 2016.
Yeah.
But theirs is a bit different. Yours seem to clarify it a bit. But so I want to know who.
Mine seems to clarify it more.
Yeah, because his own was.
This is from a textbook that is written to teach global marketing. So it will break down everything to your understanding. But I'm sure what you cited is from an article. True or false?
Yes, article.
Good.
So
good. So they develop. That is why in the beginning, when you are using certain concepts, we always encourage us researchers that you define the concept that you are using and the perspective that you are coming from. So if I read your work and then I'm seeing characteristics and you have cited these people, I'm going to use the understanding that these people used to propose these articles. I will not judge you based on Hollenson 2017. Does it make sense?
Okay.
So this one is according to Hollenson 2017.
Please, the name again.
Hollenson. It's a book.
Okay.
So it's in your course outline. It is the recommended text for the course.
Oh, okay. Yes. Because their classification is fame-based theories, host country advantage-based theories, and then the firm, and then.
So it shows that they were doing their research from a particular perspective.
Okay.
Now, the choice of approach that you use for your research is also largely determined by the purpose of your research.
Okay.
So when you determine your research purpose, it determines everything from the kind of theory that you choose. Even the definition of the concept that you choose is all determined by the purpose of your study.
Okay. Because the article, I had to.
Okay. So make sure you cite the article. That's why citation is very important to us as researchers. Because as soon as I read such as now, I'll be like, okay, source. So the moment you give me your source and I know that it's a credible source, I'm like, oh, okay, so their research was looking at it from this perspective, and that's where you are coming from. So when you see things like this, don't let it confuse you. This is the beauty of academia. We call it multiplicity of perspectives.
Okay, Doc. Thank you very much.
So you are fine, Dela.
Okay.
Okay, please, anything else? All right. So in that case, let's go into the international market segmentation. So with international market segmentation, there are 4 main steps involved. Once you are able to determine the firm characteristics and the environmental characteristics, you need to go through these stages to be able to segment the market to identify which ones you're actually interested in pursuing as a global marketer. So step 1 involves the selection of the relevant segmentation criteria that you are going to use, knowing your characteristics as a firm and the characteristics of the environment that you are operating in the environment in the host country. And then you need to develop appropriate segments within this foreign location that you want to go into, depending on whether you are targeting a particular country, or whether you are targeting a group of countries in a region, or you are targeting specific customer segments scattered across different countries. It's up to you. But this is where you develop the appropriate segments that you are going to target in terms of the different approaches that I just mentioned. Then you also consider screening the segments to narrow down the list of the markets or countries, and then specifically choosing the ones that you want to target. Because we learned when we're talking about segmentation, targeting, and positioning that it is not every market segment that you have adequate resources to target. So you need to look at the segments that offer you the highest level of opportunities and are most attractive to select and target with your resources. So once you do the screening, you select the appropriate ones and then you target them. Now, once you choose the markets within which you want to target, you also need to consider what we call micro-segmentation, where you develop the actually qualified segments out of the markets that are possible targets. Because once again, resources are not unlimited. You will always have limitation when it comes to certain markets, and you will always, as an organization, based on your resource endowments and competencies, be better at serving some markets than others. So you do further micro-segmentation to select the most attractive in terms of your resources and competencies that you can properly target. And once you determine these, you go about thinking about how you are going to enter these markets in the sequence within which you are going to do so. So let's break down these 4 steps of international market segmentation. First, let's talk about steps 1 and 2, where we define the criteria and develop the specific segments that we want to choose. Now, in going ahead to define criteria and develop segments, there are 4 general things that you have to consider as a global marketer to perform this step effectively. The first one is to think about the measurability of the criteria and the segments that you are choosing. Now, Bikoma, you said from what you said so far, where does the business model of the firm come in? The business model of the firm is part of the firm's characteristics, because your business model that you are operating as a firm here determines the degree of internationalization experience that you have. Because if your business model involves exporting some part of your produce overseas, and your business model also involves working with other partners overseas, definitely you will have some existing networks as a result of that business model. And then you will have some level of experience as a result of the business model you are operating, which involves occasionally exporting some of your items out. So the business model plays out in the characteristics of the firm, which determines how you do your business, how you allocate your resources, and the level of experience and relationships that you have at your disposal through networks. So Pikuma, does it make sense? Awesome. Okay. So in continuation with the step 1 and 2 that we're talking about, in general, the criteria for effective segmentation, like I said, should consider the following. The first one being measurability. Now, measurability here refers to the degree to which the size and purchasing power of the resulting segments can be measured. As marketers, we can't afford to be playing guessing games. You need to be able to adequately have figures to justify why you are selecting a particular segment. And this is where the marketers and the finance people and the accounting people always get to butt heads in the meeting room or in the conference room, because then the finance people are like, okay, where are the figures? You are saying that this market is attractive. You are saying that we stand to benefit. This opportunity is great. How great is it? Show us the figures that indicate measurability. Please, where are the marketers here who have butted heads with the finance people? And the finance people who have butted heads with the market people? I know there are some people in this class who have engaged in those arguments before. Please, where are they? Own up and tell us your bones of contention when it comes to measurability. Because marketers have often been accused of dreaming big. Saliu, please come in.
Doc.
Yes.
Gladly, I've been on the both sides of the divide before.
Okay.
my background is in finance,
Okay.
but some way, somehow, I found myself in service.
Okay.
I had to combine my financial technical skill with the
Yeah.
commercial technical skills that is required for the current job.
Yeah.
Now, let me start from the finance side.
Please go
So
ahead.
usually when marketers are presenting, there's some level of flamboyance that they attach to either it's a product or a service,
Yeah.
and the amount of
The
revenue
showmen
that
and
is
showwomen.
exactly, and the amount of revenue that is anticipated from a particular product.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I would even say most of the times, it is usually overestimated.
Yeah.
Most of the time it is overestimated. There are a lot of, because their assumptions are based on certain probabilities that from the finance technical side, you find it very difficult to measure.
That's true.
So for example, if somebody says they want to start exporting to northern Nigeria, that is predominantly Hausa and Muslim related,
Yeah.
they would come and tell you that, oh, traditionally we know the Hausas have a lot of money.
Yeah.
But that is not, and yes, to some extent, there is some truth in it,
Yeah.
but the large majority of the people over there are also poor.
Yeah.
So what would be the basis for they making that statement? And, you know, you would find a person wanting, they wouldn't be able to justify.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Very
then
true.
also from the finance side, so from the marketing side, there are some, it's not always the case that you will find the right amount of stats to be able to measure the outcome of a particular product.
That's true.
So I will take, what do you call it, the TurboNet that we launched, for instance.
Yeah.
Now, we know the addressable income of a lot of Ghanaians. We know the level of internet penetration, and we know this is also a mobile internet device.
Yes.
Now, having to satisfy a need of having internet in the home, the question then was, okay, people have their phones that they are using to stream, and
Yeah.
now you can project what's on your phone onto your TV to watch.
Yeah.
So where is the actual need? So the finance people would struggle to understand that, look, this is a new market that you are entering in.
Yeah.
You not be able to see the numbers now, but given the circumstance and the right approaches to marketing is used, we should be able to crack and develop that market. So I've been on both sides of the discussion.
So most of the time, who usually wins?
Oh,
Marketers.
now
Yeah, the
there's a
marketers
new-
usually win, eh?
The market, because it is
Wait.
okay.
There's a new concept that we are trying to push across our organization. We call it techno-commercial.
Yeah.
So you don't start giving technical people, be it finance, be it IS or network,
Yeah.
marketing related education when you have a product to launch.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get that into their DNA, because per their training, they don't think as commercial people.
Yeah.
So you need to start empowering them with commercial knowledge and statistics and how you view things, so that when you start making proposals, they would also start seeing things from your point of view.
That makes
So
sense.
in terms, if you are going to build a sales site, it is the network guys who would go and say, okay, looking at the stats, we have a coverage gap here, so we are going to build a sales site. But we flipped that situation on top of the head to approach it from a commercial point of view by us going there and saying that, look, looking at the population in this area, looking at the density, looking at the economic activity, we think there's potential over there. So let's go and build a site.
Yeah.
Initially, it didn't sit down well with them. So we are now dictating to them where to go and build a site, which might be way out of their traditional plan.
Yeah.
But over time, they begin to appreciate that is a more sustainable approach of doing things than looking at it from just the technical side. So yes, the marketers are winning, but it didn't used to be like that.
I think now in the new service marketing agenda, they advocate that everyone in the organization must be a marketer, from the CEO to the cleaner, because of the role each person plays in delivering the final product to the consumer. So that argument is spot on. Thank you, Della. Oh, there's something more you want to add?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I think he eventually came to marketers winning. So
winning, yes. Okay. So thank you, Della and Salute. Now, apart from measurability, we can also talk about accessibility. And it refers to the degree to which the resulting segments can be effectively reached and served. And once again, marketers have to be able to ascertain that, okay, we know this market is attractive. We know that there's potential. We know there's money to be made. But do we have access to this market? Or will we be able to have access to this market? For instance, we learned from one of our video cases on India that the Indian market is ripe for a lot of things. However, at the same time, when we look at the level of regulation that is in India now, it places a lot of restrictions on the level of international marketing activity that takes place in the country. So in that case, based on the level of regulation that a specific sector that you want to enter into is experiencing, that market may either be accessible to you or otherwise. So it's very important to look at the accessibility of the markets that we are hoping to enter into with our products and services as global marketers. And this is another very most important point, which the marketers always like to embellish. And that is about the substantiality and the profitability of the segment. And here we are basically talking about the degree to which the segments are sufficiently large and or profitable. And this is the part where the marketers tend to embellish and do all the wild things, because they want to be able to convince whoever the prospective audience is that this market is worth our time because there's money to be made. So it is important to be able to check the substantiality and profitability, because a market may be measurable, it may be accessible to you. But when you look at profitability, and here we are not talking about sustainability and profitability in the short term, but into the long term, because we want to be able to make our resources work for us for a long period of time. So substantiality and profitability are very important. And then lastly, we can talk about actionability. We may have the first three in place. However, the actionability of this segment, which refers to the degree to which the organization has sufficient resources to formulate effective marketing programs and make things happen, may be lacking. So here, sometimes the finance people and accounting people may disagree with the marketing people, not because they do not believe that the ideas are good enough, but the scale on which the marketing people want to go at it. The finance and accounting people do not believe that the resources they have are enough to go and do that. And we know that most firms have certain budgets that they have put in place for marketing activity, specific budgets for specific activities and strategies they want to undertake. So when marketers are asking for something, most of the time that is beyond the budgets that they have been allocated, it becomes a tussle, because without these resources, the marketers can't do their job. And the finance and accounting people are saying that the resources are not there. So as marketers, we have to learn to be modest. Salim, please come in.
Yeah, Doc, I've been observing an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah.
We see organizations that are very rife when it comes to marketing spend.
Yeah.
Their CFOs are not trained accountants.
Wow.
They may have the professional certification and qualification, but their undergraduate studies was not in accounting.
Okay.
It's a very interesting phenomenon that I've observed, and it's quite intriguing. So if you look at what's happening in most of the tech-related organizations, and most of these organizations that do a lot of commercial activations,
yeah,
their CFOs, I don't know if it is a strategy that the organizations are taking, but for some way, the training of accountants make them frugal.
Very.
So it's very difficult for them to spend. I was having a chat with one of my finance colleagues, and I told them before our former CFO came, they were behaving like accountants. But when he came, he reoriented them to start thinking like finance people,
Yeah,
with a bit of commercial, juices in them.
that's
So
true.
it's a very interesting phenomenon that I'm observing in corporate organizations now.
I totally agree with you. So you even find that in some organizations, they go as far as having a CAO and a CFO because they believe that both of them bring different perspectives to the table. So it's a very, very interesting thing you have noticed. Thank you for sharing, Salu. Ivy, you said, does the resource talk about the tangibles and intangibles? Yes, both tangible and intangible resources. Please come in, Ivy. Ivy Esiama, your hand is up. Please come in. Can you hear me? Ivy? Oh, yeah, okay.
No, Doc, you answered my question on the resource. I'm okay, but I think there's another Isiama who has risen her hand.
Oh, okay. I think she has put her hand back down.
Okay,
all right.
Doc.
Thank you to Ivy. Okay, so that is it for the four general criteria, right? So in considering these criteria with regards to segmentation, let's quickly look at this diagram that we have. So the diagram is telling us that there are two characteristics that you can place on a continuum when it comes to identifying specific segments in the international market. And in segmenting, we discussed several characteristics that we use, including demographics, gender, psychographics, among others. Now, the diagram that we are looking at here is telling us basically that the more general the characteristics are, the higher the degree of measurability, accessibility, and actionability of that segment. However, the more specific the characteristics of that segment are, the degree of measurability, accessibility, and actionability become lower. However, the market segment becomes more relevant. And I believe in recent times, these are, okay, Ivy, thank you. And I believe in recent times, segmentation using specific characteristics are the ones that are helping firms set themselves apart. Because the general characteristics are basically the ones that most firms generally go into and use to segment their markets. However, you realize that the market leaders, like the MTNs of our time, usually go in for the specific characteristics using more complex segmentation criteria like the psychographics and the demographics. Here they are talking about issues of culture, lifestyle, personality, attitudes, and tastes. These are usually characteristics that are not very overt. So even though the level of measurability and accessibility and actionability is not very tangible, like Saliu helped us to establish a few moments ago, that some of the things the marketers can accurately help you measure, but with some of them, the measurability is very low. Likewise, accessibility and actionability. However, they can be very high when it comes to their relevance in determining the success or otherwise of a firm in a foreign market. So even though general characteristics are a good starting point when you are segmenting your market as a global marketer, it is encouraged that you go into more detailed and in-depth analysis using specific characteristics like culture and lifestyle to be able to fine-tune the market segments and be able to pick out specific segments that have been largely ignored and lumped up under generalized segments. So once you are able to use more specific characteristics, you can be able to target segments that are not generally catered for by the usual marketing activities and products and services that are put out there by the firms in the foreign market. And that is the way by which several firms have been able to develop a competitive advantage while operating in foreign markets. So that is it for the continuum discussing the basis of international market segmentation. Is there anything someone wanted to say before we move on? Or we are good? Okay. Oh, Mr. Samasano.
Please, we are good.
You're good. Oh, Sylvia's hand is up.
Yes.
Hello. Okay.
So I wanted to just quickly inquire.
Okay.
I see this process again as, I wouldn't say quite cumbersome, but perhaps lengthy.
Yes.
And I wanted to find out from you whether it requires that one exhausts all of these, because then from the firm level environment, I mean, drilling it down to the level of segmentation amongst others. Is it obviously the research that would go into this would be very much detailed?
Yeah.
Do you have to check the list and ensure every bit of it is, I mean, done in order to satisfy yourself as a firm that you're ready to go?
It depends on how far you want to go.
Sorry?
It depends on how far you want to go to satisfy yourself.
Okay.
As a firm. And then you realize that, like I said earlier, some characteristics may be more relevant in some sectors and contexts than others.
Yeah.
So you need to look at your unique circumstance and look at the list and say, okay, so given what we are trying to sell, the market we are trying to sell it in the nature of our competition, what should we really pay close attention to? And what could possibly hurt us if we do not pay attention? And sometimes too, we need to know of all the various options that are available because we are strategists. So at the end of the day, you need to know all the possibilities so that in case something is not working or you are looking for something to set yourself apart, you can quickly fall on other strategies to be able to make sure that you can recover. Does it make sense, Sylvia?
Yes, no, it does.
So in the event that perhaps your initial strategy just focused on language and political factors and demography and all the list we have on the general characteristics, and you realize that it seems all the other firms are taking this into consideration, you now start asking yourself, okay, what can I do to set myself apart? And then you can now start going into more specifics, because then you know that there's a possibility that a number of the other firms you are competing with have not considered these specifics into detail. And that is where you will find your niche.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Sylvia. So I think some time ago, Sally was even telling us that the segmentation thing was even a daily thing for him at his workplace and a weekly situation where they were always crunching the figures and looking at what the customers were up to and using it to identify new segments with which to target with different product formulations. Sally, I think you mentioned this some time ago.
Yes, Doc.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's important that as a strategist, you have all these tools at your disposal. So in the event that a particular strategy is not working, you can be able to reformulate your strategy using other techniques to guarantee success.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome, Sylvia. Oh, Fendi, you said I should slow down a bit for you. Okay, I'll do my best. Sorry about that. Okay. So moving on, once we have been able to define the criteria and develop our market segments, we now go on to step 3, where we are screening our segments. And in screening the segments, there are 2 main levels of screening that is done. The first level is known as the preliminary screening or the coarse-grained screening. Now, in the preliminary screening or coarse-grained screening is where the markets and the countries that are screened by the firm are primarily done according to external screening criteria, right? So they use criteria that are external to the firm. And this is where we look at all the different micro and macro level factors like the inflation levels, political issues, socio-cultural issues, among others. And this helps us to do a preliminary level of analysis where we can exclude a number of countries that do not meet certain criteria that we are looking for. And we do this before we go into in-depth detail in the next level of screening, which is called fine-grained screening. And under the fine-grained screening, here we now look more closely at the firm's competitive power and the firm's competencies and resources in the different markets that it is considering, and how, based on the competencies and resources that the firm possesses, they can be able to take advantage of the opportunities that they have identified in these markets. So let's look at these levels of screening into more detail, starting from preliminary screening. Now, under preliminary screening, like I said, the number of markets are reduced by coarse-grained analysis. where we look at mainly macro-oriented screening issues and criteria. Like for instance, you look at the population size and you let it guide you in terms of the breakdown of the population, depending on the kind of product that you are selling. You will look at the breakdown of the population in terms of gender, perhaps male and female, the different age groups within the population, the different income levels, which can lead you into considering the GNP per capita of the country, the level of inflation, among other things that will influence the purchasing power of the people and whether or not they can be able to afford what you're trying to sell to them in that market. You also need to think about restrictions with regards to the export and import of goods and services from one country to another, depending on where you are sending your products from. Because the level of economic integration, perhaps, that exists between the home and host country can to a large extent determine whether or not your business activity or the trade activity that you're trying to undertake will be feasible. And you also need to think about the share of the population that have access to the internet, especially where the product or service you're trying to sell is one that is powered by internet or information communication technology. For instance, in India, Domino's Pizza's success was largely attributed to the level of penetration of internet in the country and the amount of people who were using mobile phones, which made it easy for them to penetrate the market and dominate it using their mobile phone app that they developed for pizza ordering and delivery. At the same time, with preliminary screening, like I just mentioned, we can also think about the level of infrastructure as well as utilities that are available to the people. So how many people own cars? How many people are using smartphones? The destinations that you want to go and sell your product in within the host country. Is there enough infrastructure to facilitate the distribution of your product and service within that context? You need to ask yourself all these questions in the preliminary screening. So once you're done with the preliminary screening, it helps you to be able to determine to a large extent which host countries are plausible in terms of selling your product or service, and then which ones are not. So you can eliminate them in advance and not waste your time and energy considering them into the long term, where ultimately you will realize that they are not good enough markets to sell your products and services in. Now, to be able to do preliminary screening and make it more simpler, there are several indexes that have been developed by marketing professionals and strategists across the world. But there are very popular ones that most people generally use, including the Business Environment Risk Index, which is known as the BERI Index. And there are different consulting companies that have come up with their versions of the BERI Index, and some of them offer it up for sale. So if you go online right now and you Google the Business Environment Risk Index, you see so many consulting companies that have come up with their own version of the index, right? Including the McKinsey Group, among others. Then we can also talk about the Business Monitor International, which is also another index that is used to do preliminary screening of global markets to generally see if at the macro level, the market is good enough to consider. We also have the Country Risk Service that is provided by the Economist Intelligence Unit. And they actually go ahead to produce an actual report or document ranking the countries across the world based on the level of economic risk that they present. So let me see if I can project the Country Risk Service documents for us to consider it briefly. Please give me a moment. Okay, so please, I'm projecting to the screen now. Let me know when you can see the screen. Please, can you see it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, Doc.
Good. So you can see that they have listed, it's the EIU website. So it's eiu.com. And they have risk assessments for all the countries, right? So you can see that they have listed the countries based on continent. So they have the Americas, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, right? And aside from that, they also have categories based on industry. So if you are looking for the specific indices for a particular industry, you can check here. And here we can see they have indices for the automotive industry, consumer goods, energy, financial services, healthcare, telecommunication, competitor intelligence, as well as commodities, and then oil adequacy index. So let's look at, which one should we go for? Competitor intelligence. Would that one be good? Okay, let's try competitor intelligence. All right, so here we can see that after we click competitor intelligence, it brings us to this page where they are generally showing us the solutions that they offer with regard to competitor intelligence. And here they said, we monitor the world to prepare you for what's ahead. So their indices generally help you understand a country's political, policy, and economic outlook with the world's best forward-looking analysis and data. So their country analysis services looks at global dynamics that impact your organization, helping you to operate effectively and plan for the future. So there's a tab that says Inquire Now. So you can click on the tab and it will take you to another page where you can put in your details to make an inquiry, right? So once you enter your details, they will get back to you with whatever information that you're looking for. But they also have a brochure that you can download. Let me see if the brochure will download. Okay, so the brochure downloaded. So the brochure tells us basically what is covered in the country analysis. So they are saying the information they'll provide you includes a global outlook spanning politics, economics, and market moving topics. And then they also provide you daily insights on the developments that impact the future outlook. And they'll also give you overviews of country forecasts over the medium-term outlook. And they'll also give you medium-term country forecasts on 200 countries' political and economic landscapes on the basis of 9 topics. And they'll also give you long-term country forecasts on the structural trends shaping 80 major economies. And they'll also give you industry analysis on the outlook for the 6 major industries in around 70 markets. They'll also give you regulatory intelligence on the policies that matter to businesses in 50 key economies. They will also give you commodity forecasts on supply, demand, and prices of 40 critical goods. They will also give you macroeconomic data on forecasts as well as historic trends. They will also give you industry data on demand and supply of key goods now and in the future. And they'll also give you proprietary ratings on the business environment. So I think this goes back somehow to the question that Sylvia was asking. Sylvia, some of these information that we saw that was saying that you have to find in the list that was provided, some of it has been compacted into this form by all these independent research institutions for you to access at a click. Good. So they are doing most of the work for you because this is a lot of research that, like you said, it's a lot of work that you can't do on your own. So if you are paying them perhaps a monthly subscription to do all this for you and just be feeding you with the information perhaps every month, it's a plus. Then you can be free to make other decisions and do more research on other matters that will complement this information to help you to formulate a better strategy for your marketing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So please, I hope we are okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to our discussion. So in that case, like the EIU, like I said, the BMI is also there, the Berry Index is also there. So you need to be able to find out which of these indices provides the kind of information that you're looking for to help you in your decision making. But it is worthy to note that most of the information that is provided by these indices are largely macroeconomic information with a bit of micro level economic information sprinkled in there. So if you are looking for more in-depth information at the industry level and perhaps at the firm level, you may have to supplement the information that these reports and indices provide with other sources of information. Because remember, we mentioned in our discussion on research that you need both secondary and primary data. So there's some information that you can be able to obtain through secondary data gathering, but you will also have to undertake some form of primary data collection to be able to get the information that you are looking for your decision making. So the book gives us a breakdown of some of the criteria under the very index. And similar to what is provided by the EIU Consumer Country Risk Service, you can see that they are also looking at things related to the macro level of the economy, including political stability, economic growth, currency convertibility, labor cost and productivity, short-term credit, long-term loans and venture capital, attitude towards the foreign investor and profits, nationalization, monetary inflation, balance of payments, enforceability of contracts, bureaucratic delays, communications, which together can be bundled together with infrastructure, as well as local management and partners, and then professional services and contractors. Now, depending on the yes, Godwin.
This question, you know, like the BMI and the European, what do you call it, the economic whatever that we just looked at.
The EIU, yeah.
Yes. I just want to ask, because from things that I've heard and things that I know, sometimes these people, the lenses that they look through are sometimes skewed.
Exactly.
So what do you do to assure yourself that the information that you have there is going to be good and quality information for you to use? Because sometimes if you look at the things that they see, then it means you never invest in some countries, but going on the ground, it's a whole total different ball game.
Yeah. Sally, you want to come in before I give my view? Sally, please come in.
Oh, yeah, Doc. I was going to ask, anyway, Ivan, response to you. I told you during the lecture that we were discussing, we need to go into this area to provide context. We are now talking about lenses. Let's go and provide context.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, from this broad spectrum, in terms, because this is bringing the importance of marketing information systems and intelligence to the
fore.
So in the large scheme of things in marketing, let's say in our market today, which area would be profitable if somebody wants to consider, divesting in?
In terms of what? You want to divest into information provision?
It could be that, or, in all these, because the more we keep discussing issues around internationalization and all these criteria to select a market and STP process, it's a wealth of information that if you are able to pitch it successfully to a company that you profile and you assess well, might sell. So I'm asking, from your experience, is there something that you think would be profitable if somebody wants to go into?
Oh yes, I think it would be very profitable if you want to go into it as a business, because then you can be able to address the issues that people like Godwin have. Because Godwin's main issue is that how do we attest to the credibility of some of these sources of information? And how do we know that the information they are providing is not skewed? So if you decide to go into that business, it will be your business to sit down and scan all these sources and then determine which ones are of relevance and can be relied upon in terms of decision making. And given your area of expertise and knowing what is relevant in terms of information needs, especially for marketers who are wanting to go international, you can look at the nature of the organization, the product or service they want to deal in, and recommend specific sources of marketing intelligence that they have to subscribe to. So your job can be basically designing their marketing intelligence system, where you are telling them which sources of information to look out for, which sources of information they have to be subscribed to, and which sources of information that are reliable enough for them to be able to use as sources of information to guide their strategy formulation and decision making. So it will be very profitable. But the thing is, you have to have the reputation of someone who knows what they are doing for them to take you seriously. And that alone is very difficult.
Madam, say it again.
No.
Say it again.
They're like coming.
We're come and borrow your reputation. We'll come and borrow your reputation.
Because even they bring us on board as consultants to give them advice, right? We give them advice, we tell them what to do. They ignore us. We say, oh, you are book. You are too, you are not. Yes.
Yeah. So to add on to what Godwin said, beyond the theory, is there a customer A or a customer B who has applied these principles that you know of and they've been successful, so that we can easily relate to it? Because it's becoming like a theory, do this, do that, do this.
Which principle? I'm teaching you all the theory because all the firms that are around us are applying these things in so many different ways. The problem is that we can't use most of it as examples because a lot of the firms see these activities that they undertake as intelligent. And that is where they get their sources of competitive advantage. So the moment it becomes clear that this is exact, remember we were discussing this thing even with Saliu, and at some point we were crossing certain boundaries. He told us that some of the information is bordering on marketing intelligence. Do you remember?
Yeah,
he can't tell us. So several firms are using these sources of information and they are applying all these techniques I'm telling you about in so many different ways. But like I mentioned earlier, it's on a case-by-case basis. But you need to be able to know what is out there and the tools that are at your disposal to know which ones will be relevant to you in what circumstance. So at least if you get into trouble and perhaps there's a country that your firm wants to go and do business in, and you people are not getting any information about the country, at least you know from global marketing class that there are certain intelligence units that specialize in collecting information of this nature on companies. And you will go and fall on that information to help your company. True or false?
True.
Good. Okay. So we are training you people to become professionals, such that you need the theory so that when you are on the field and you see a practical situation that seems unsolvable, you can apply the theory that you know to solve the problem.
Madam, I'm so grateful that this theory is coming up, because sometimes you get into a certain position, they expect that you know all these things.
Of course.
They will be asking you questions. Yeah, so it's really great that you are enlightening us on it.
Exactly. So, Dela, do you see the point now?
Yeah.
So that is what will separate you, the CEO, from the confused manager who can see that sales are going down and he doesn't even know where to start from.
Okay. But I understand the aspect of some crossing the certain boundaries, but I was thinking maybe we mentioned maybe MTN. Then we can easily relate to some of the points that you expatiate on. Then it becomes, but of course, it's a market intelligence issue. So
that's the thing. And the moment you start doing that, it's like you're putting someone's company on blast. You see, I know a lot of please go ahead, Saliu.
Yeah, Saliu. Yeah.
You remember the discussion that we had on when Doc said she's struggling to get funding for a lab that she's trying to create like to test products and services.
Yeah.
And I said there's often a disconnect between the academia and industry. And the problem is not just one way, but it's both ways. So a lot of the things that is happening in industry today have a theoretical basis, unless you don't know what the theory is, but there is a theoretical basis to it. So there's a concept in marketing that we call share of wallet. So today, every organization, regardless of the industry that you are in, your customers.
This is called what again?
Share of wallet.
Market share.
So no, it's not market share. It is the share of your disposable income that organization has access to. So if you take Coca-Cola, for instance, Coca-Cola see your whatever. So today, if your disposable income is 10 Ghana cedis, they want to know how much of that 10 Ghana cedis they fit in. So that is why they brought all these products and services to be able to quench your thirst. So if you are somebody who drinks beer like Chief Tano, the
really? No, but this is confidential. No.
He knows. He will come and attest to what I'm saying. They want want to know how much you are going to spend from your income on that. So a telco, for instance, we want to know how much of that 10 Ghana cedis that you have that you want to spend on your voice, your data, and then your SMS.
Yeah.
Now, beyond the share of wallet, now we want to be part of your life. So we have just slightly extended the concept to mean to share of life from share of wallet. But the theoretical basis is from share of wallet. So we want to now be, as soon as you wake up, the first thing you look at is your phone. So we want to be there for you to remember us as soon as you pick up your phone. So everything that industry is doing has a theoretical base. Now it's now up to either the industry or the person who is in that particular role to look for the theoretical basis to support or to justify what he is doing in industry. It's very important. We need to look out for that as professionals.
Exactly.
It's very, very important.
Thank you, sir. Dela, let me ask you a question. You work at a bank, right?
Yeah.
You have some publications in your offices and your lobby for visitors, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what publications do you have generally?
Oh, for the international one, is it the ones that relates to banks? We have some few ones that relates to bank and then the banking sector.
Oh no. Like when for instance, when I go to EcoBank headquarters, the lobby where you sit and wait, there are certain publications like magazines and stuff. I always see The Economist.
Yeah, The Economist. Yeah.
What do you think they are there for? In your view, why do they display those things there?
He doesn't know.
It's just to inform the customer about.
So you've never picked up one to read. No, you've never picked up one to read.
No. We just leave it in our, especially in our VIP sections for them.
VIP. Thank you. Have you seen your CEO like taking time off during their tea and coffee break to just read newspapers and things?
Yeah.
What do you think they are doing when they are doing that?
It's
like most of the time they are just whiling away time.
Looking for vital information.
That is the problem. That is the problem. That
is
is the
from now.
That is a problem with industry. We don't value research.
When you see one now, please pick it up and read. That is how the CEOs come by all this intelligence. I know CEOs who subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, Forbes Africa, the Forbes Global, just to make sure, and they read these things not just to while away time. They are looking for information. They are looking for where their next business will come from. They are looking for the next opportunity that they can spot and take advantage of. They are looking for who their next competitor is, who is on their heels, who is chasing them. All these are sources of intelligence. So you see, there's a theoretical basis for all those things. So it's not just fancy for the company to be paying all those expensive subscriptions and then every morning they bring the newspaper just to while away time. No. They are all sources of intelligence.
Okay. Look, at the beginning of this year, there was a publication that the group asked us to subscribe to. They wanted to test and see if it's going to be of value to us.
Yeah.
It's called eMarketer. They share research information every single day.
That's true.
It's on multitude of products and services and future outlook. During this COVID, they share 2 articles per day.
Yeah.
And it's well researched and it gives you an insight into where whatever industry that you are into, it's heading toward.
Yeah.
It's a fine source of intelligence that prior to me reading that, I never knew that. And that's why I keep emphasizing on marketing intelligence, because people spend their time practically thinking through what it would take you and your organization decades to figure out.
Exactly.
So if you don't read, if you don't research, if you don't find those things out, you'll be missing out on very huge opportunities. It's a gold mine. Dela, Industry, we need to go back to school. It's very important.
Sally, please, what's the name of the article this thing again? The journal is
called
talking about the share every morning.
E-marketer, but it's very expensive, cheap. It's very expensive.
How much is
Their subscription, they are charging $1,500.
So the one that you download, then just forward it to us.
It's for his organization. Let your GC.
The license organization.
Thank you.
Everybody to be intelligent.
Anyways, thank you. Say e-commerce there.
E-marketer.
E-marketer.
Oh, thank you. Market is the commerce market.
Hey, right there.
Thank you, Salu, for that submission. Thank you, everyone. That was very eye-opening, right? So please, henceforth, any professional publication we see, academic publication, please just at least take and scan through and see what new information you can pick up from there. That may change the direction of your firm's strategy.
Doc.
Yes.
I think the Harvard Business Review, they have an application on I think Android and what do you call it? There's a free section that you can actually read. Exactly. I think it gives you a couple of pages to read for free. You choose what you want to read, and sometimes it's 5 seconds. What I tend to do is, if the time is just 5 minutes or 2 minutes, I scan through the chapters that I want, screenshot all of them, put them down.
Exactly.
Then read it, because every day gives you, that's the way to go. Because sometimes you don't have the money to subscribe to some of these things, but they've made it available in a way to.
That's very true. And there are so many others. The World Economic Forum also has a page like that on Facebook and on Instagram. The Business Insider has one like that, also on Facebook and on Instagram. So like Godwin is saying, that there are ways to keep yourself informed. So please, let's take advantage of these. We are global marketers. We have to be at the forefront. Okay, so that brings us to fine grain screening. After the coarse grain screening, we need to do more fine grain screening, because now we have a general view of what the market segments are like. And then now we have to be able to look within ourselves and see if we have what it takes to target these markets, right? So to be able to do very good fine grain screening, we use what we call the market attractiveness and competitive strength matrix, which helps us to compare the level of attractiveness of the market to our strength as a firm in terms of resources and competencies to be able to compete effectively in this market. Now, again, there are several dimensions that you consider under the market attractiveness and competitive strength criteria. However, they are on a case-by-case basis, like we have established. So depending on the unique circumstances you find yourself in, you will need to be able to determine the specific criteria that will be relevant to determine how attractive the market is, and then how strong you are as a firm to compete effectively in this market. So on the basis of that, Hollenson 2017 suggests a grade that we can use, a basic grade that a firm can use to mark themselves. Now, the grade is divided into two, and for each of them, you have to be able to rank yourself out of 100 to be able to rate how attractive the market is and how poised you are to compete within that market. So under market attractiveness, they provide a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being very poor and 5 being very good. So you rank yourself on the criteria along this continuum, where you'll be able to provide specific weights for each of them. And by the end of the day, you'll be able to grade yourself out of 100 to see how well you do. So under market attractiveness here, Hollenson suggests criteria like market size, the market growth potential, because like we said, you can't just look at the here and now. You need to look into the long term, in the future of the market and its potential for growth. You also need to look at the buying structure in the market, as well as the prices, possible prices that you can charge, the purchasing power. We just learned about share of wallet. And we also need to look at market access, because we talked about measurability and accessibility. We also need to think about the competitive intensity. The level of competition within the market can to a large extent determine your success or otherwise once you begin to operate in that market. And then we can also think about the level of political and economic risk that come with doing business in that market, among others. So once you are able to grade yourself on all the criteria that you deem important to determine the attractiveness of the market, you can be able to tell whether the market is really attractive enough based on the score it earns out of 100 to be able to proceed to select that market or not.
Doug.
Yes.
Please, if you go back to please, what's meant by the buying structure?
Let's quickly check. Let's do the research.
Yes, please.
Let's look at market buying structure. I'm going to share the screen with you so that we can all look at what it entails.
Yeah. Oh, thank God. Well, for phone Ivy. Now I'm sorry, Jerry.
Oh,
Ivy.
Oh, it's not me, oh.
It's Fendi.
Hey, Fendi J. Okay, no wonder. Say, wow.
Okay, so I opened the mbaschool.com to look at the nature of buying structure. Now, yes, so they are saying that buying structure is the organizational structure of the buying authorities within a company. Now, they are saying that there are different tiers in the buying structure, and each level or tier in the buying structure has its own price and price negotiations and discounts. So moving down to the setup of the buying structure, we can see that it is in tiers, right? So they look at the corporate tier, the warehouse tier, the distribution tier, and the store tier. So in this case, if depending on how you are entering the foreign market, you need to be able to set up the tier descriptions that you will be using. So as a global company, if you are setting up your own warehouse, or you are using your own distributor, or you are using a third-party distributor, or you are using a third-party retailer, all these things will determine the buying structure that you have to go through in terms of selling your products and services in the foreign market. So I believe there's more detail to this, but as you go further down, they present a grid that shows different entities within the buying structure, right? And the various level of price negotiations that can take place at each tier. So for instance, they said that the global company is at tier 1, and their distribution centers in level 3 receive a 3% of the cost price of all items as company discounts. Then when they come to the tier 2, where their American warehouse is, the American warehouse gets a regional rebate of $2 per unit when sales of products of a particular product reach 20,000 units. So basically, it's about the different price negotiations and adjustments that are involved that influence the price of the product, right, before it gets to the final consumer. So we realize that depending on how many intermediaries you have in the distribution process, the price can be adjusted so many times before it even gets to the final consumer. So in terms of, let's go back to the diagram and then let me use that to explain it. In terms of the buying structure, if we talk about the buying structure, for instance, in relation to market attractiveness, your product may initially be produced and sold at $300. So in your mind, you are sending the product to the market to be sold for $300 per unit. However, because of the different levels within the buying structure, that $300 price that you initially thought the product will sell in the market may end up ultimately getting sold at, say, $500 because of the different levels in the buying structure. Because perhaps from you, depending on the mode that you are using, say you are using an export agent, you give your product to the export agent who takes it to the market and then gives it over to a distributor in that place. And the distributor will add their own adjustments to the price and then resell it to perhaps a wholesaler. The wholesaler will also add their own markup to it and then sell it to a subsequent retailer, who will then add their own markup to it and sell it to the final consumer. So by the time it gets to that level, the buying structure has caused the whole price of the product from what it initially was to increase exponentially which will reduce the level of attractiveness of that market, because perhaps if you take it to another market, you may have the opportunity not to do it by export, but to perhaps set up your own sales subsidiary. So it means that you will have the chance to sell it at a cheaper price, because it will be your own sales subsidiary that will be distributing it directly to the retailers or perhaps directly to the consumer. So it cuts out all those extra levels in the buying structure that increase the cost of the product. Please, does it make sense, Godwin?
Madam, thank you so much. This is very enlightening.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So after the market attractiveness, we can talk about the relative competitive strength of the firm. And this is usually done in regard to the strongest competitor. So here, we are looking at the strongest competitor in the market you are entering into, and you are comparing yourself with the competitor along certain lines. So here, again, we are using the continuum of 1 to 5, 1 being very poor and 5 being very good. And we are looking at criteria such as the product's fit to market demand. So in comparison with the strongest competitor in the market, when you look at the products that you both offer, which one of the two is a better fit for the market demand? If yours is a better fit, that means you will score higher in terms of relative competitive strength. Please, does it make sense? Please, does it make sense?
Yes, please.
Good. And then in terms of prices and conditions, if you can afford to sell your product at a cheaper price than the strongest competitor in the market, that again will be an advantage for you. So that means that you will be at a higher competitive strength than your competitor with regard to price. Similarly, we can do the same thing with market presence. In this case, the competitor may be at an advantage because they are already in the market and perhaps they may have more distribution channels through which to get the final product to the consumer. However, you as a new entrant into the market perhaps may not have that much of a large market presence. So your relative competitive strength as compared to the strongest competitor may be weaker. Likewise, marketing. Perhaps the competitor has already been doing a lot of marketing activity and already has a high level of market awareness in the foreign market that you are entering into. So perhaps in terms of their marketing activities and communication, they may be at a stronger position than you are. We can also do the same for obtainable market share, which currently the Ghana government is trying so hard to take away part of MTN's market share forcibly to give to some other telcos, which I still do not understand. Because technically, shouldn't it be the forces of the market forces that determine who has the highest market share? So by intervening in that manner, I don't know what they hope to achieve, but technically, if you are comparing yourself to the strongest competitor in that market and you're now going into the market, you need to be able to see how much of the market share you can obtain in relation to the strongest competitor. If you believe that you are going to be at a position of disadvantage and there's no probability that you will get the opportunity to regain some of that market share to put you in a competitive position, it will mean that when it comes to the competition, you are relatively weak. Likewise, financial results. What is in terms of financials, how strong are you as compared to the strongest competitor in the market, right? So all these things are some of the criteria you can consider when you are looking into your competitive strength in relation to the strongest competitor. So by the time you finish this, you can be able to tell whether the market is attractive enough for you to pursue and whether or not you have the strength to compete with the level of competition that already exists in the market should you decide to select that market. And that is what brings us to the end of the step 3, which involves the screening of the segments. Now, once we are done screening the segments, we now do what we call micro-segmentation, where we develop sub-segments under the general segments that we have identified. Because like I said, the easiest thing is to go for the general segments that everyone is going for. And usually the variables that they go for when it comes to the general segmentation include the more obvious ones, like the demographics and the psychographics. And sometimes some people will use geographics. But however, there are deeper levels of psychographic segmentation, like lifestyles and values, that you can use to segment the market and discover more niche consumers, and then also combine different forms of segmentation criteria to create a more complex criterion that you can use to segment the market on a micro level, to come up with more sub-segments that most of the other firms generally ignore. And this will help you to be able to compete more effectively internationally within these sub-segments, which, like I said, are generally ignored by most of the companies that will be operating already in that market. So once you are able to undertake your market segmentation and then sub-segment the market to the specific sub-segments you want to focus on, the final step involves your market entry. And here there are three main questions you ask yourself. How many markets do you want to enter into? When do you want to do this market entry? And in what sequence do you want this market entry to proceed? Now, the sequence within which you want the market entry to proceed and how many markets you want to enter into determines the kind of entry mode that you choose to enter the market with. Now, we'll discuss entry modes into more detail in our next session. But in today's session, we will do our best to discuss the sequence of entering into markets and how many markets that you decide to enter into will determine the sequence that you choose for that entry. So before we go into the sequence of entry, which determines your market expansion strategy, I'd like to ask if someone has anything they need clarification on or any question they want to ask before we go on into the number of markets and the sequence, which determines the expansion strategy. Does anyone have anything they want to say? Or everyone is okay?
Yeah, Doc.
All right. So let's go into the market expansion strategies. Now, market expansion strategies, like I said, are a combination of the number of markets that you as a global marketer choose to enter into and the sequence within which you choose to enter those markets. So when we talk about market expansion strategies, it is basically a key decision that the global marketer has to make. And this is with regard to the different patterns with which you choose to enter the market, how many markets you choose to enter, and when you choose to make that entry. Now, these different patterns are likely to cause the development of different competitive conditions in different markets over time. So, for instance, depending on whether you choose to enter one market at a time or more than one market at a time, it will determine how competitive you will become over time. Because if you enter one market at a time, ignoring other markets, there's the likelihood that by the time you come around to entering those markets, the conditions and the level of competition within those markets would have changed. So determining which pattern you want to use to enter a particular market or a certain number of markets will to a large extent determine how competitive you are within these markets as time goes on in the long term. So for instance, a company can purposely select few markets to focus on because they want to be able to hone their global marketing techniques and expertise within these markets to make maximum returns. Now, by doing this, they can be able to create a higher market share because they are focusing on a certain number of markets at a time in which they will not have equal performance. Therefore, in the markets where they are doing well, it is likely to offset the markets where they are not doing so well, right? Which will put them in a stronger competitive position. Because in the event that perhaps they are operating in the Nigerian market and they are doing excellently well, but they are not doing so well in the Ghana market, they can be using the returns and income they are making from the Nigerian market to offset the losses that they are making in the Ghanaian market. So this is a primary example of how the pattern of market entry that you choose and the sequence you choose to do it in can influence your competitiveness in the long run. So let's go ahead and look at the different market expansion strategies. Now, in designing your market expansion strategy as a global marketer, you need to answer two underlying questions. The first one being that, will you enter the market incrementally or simultaneously? In the event that you decide to enter the market incrementally, we say you are using what we call the waterfall approach or the trickle-down approach, where you are doing it in a sequential manner, step by step. However, for the simultaneous approach, we refer to it as the shower approach, meaning that you are entering several markets simultaneously at the same time using different global marketing strategies. And once you decide which approach you are using, whether incremental or simultaneous, you also need to answer the question of whether you want your international marketing efforts to be concentrated among one or just a few markets, or to be diversified across several or diverse international markets. Yes, Godwin, please come in.
Madam, please, can you give us an example of maybe a company, let's say company A, them using incremental, simultaneous, then whether concentrated or diversified?
Okay,
I think it will help.
Okay, so Lancaster University is an example. They expanded into Ghana incrementally, in the sense that initially they were very modest in their international marketing strategy. So they came and they got a very small location. Who knows where they were at first before they moved to where they currently are?
ANC Mall.
No, they were not in the ANC Mall. They were not in the ANC Mall.
Oh, okay.
They rented a building. They rented a building at the back of ANC Mall, somewhere in East Legon. It was, I think, 2 floors or 3 floors. And then what they were doing was they had contract staff, and then they were bringing all their faculty from Lancaster, UK to come and teach and go. So they did that for some time. And then as they started gaining traction and becoming popular, they decided that, okay, they would need to have Ghanaian faculty to offset the foreign faculty. So they would bring in some foreign faculty and then took a few Ghanaian faculty on part-time basis and gave them contracts to be helping the foreign faculty to teach. And they started with, I think, only one specialization. But after some time, they started expanding the number of specializations that they offer. And then as time went on, they realized that, okay, they were growing. So their current location where they were renting was not big enough. So they moved into the ANC Mall and got a portion of the ANC building to start running their programs. And then there they decided that, okay, let's start getting full-time Ghanaian faculty to be teaching specific courses, especially on the popular programs that they had. So they now started employing full-time Ghanaian faculty. And currently, even though the faculty are full-time, it's still contractual. But they will employ you on a full-time basis, and then they'll keep renewing your contract for as long as you decide to keep working with them. So that is a typical example of an incremental strategy where they did not come all in at once. They came in gradually, slowly increasing their level of commitment. And I don't know if they came into Africa first through Ghana. Please, does anyone know if Lancaster was in any other African country apart from Ghana? Does anyone know?
No, please.
Okay, so technically, this is the essence of the assignment that I gave you. Right? To appreciate some of the thought processes that the firms go through when they're deciding which markets to enter and how to go about the market entry. You see, and we can have typical examples of other organizations that we are operating in, that are operating in Ghana, sorry, because most of them, especially the virtual ones, do not even have to use the incremental strategy. And, yes.
Please, they have some in Egypt and Nigeria too.
Okay, but were those ones open before Ghana? But they were open at the same time?
I don't know. I just found the locations they had in Africa. That's what I did.
So if we do more research and we can find out whether they were open simultaneously or one after the other, if they were all open simultaneously, then we can say that they were using a simultaneous approach. But if one was opened, followed by the other, and then followed by the other, we can say that what they were applying there was an incremental or waterfall approach.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay, it makes sense.
You see, so a firm can decide which approach they want to use. Again, depending on the factors that we have identified come into play in making this decision, as well as the firm's competence. Yes, Lucy.
It's incremental. They started in Ghana,
good,
Nigeria, and then Egypt.
Good. So you see, they use Ghana as a stepping stone. And with the experience that they gained, they expanded to other countries. So we've seen a typical example of the incremental strategy. And like I was saying, for the organizations that are largely virtual, theirs is automatically a simultaneous expansion because anyone can access the URL from anywhere and make purchases. However, they can decide which markets to serve simultaneously. So for a long time, you can order things from Amazon, but they cannot come to you directly in Ghana. Do we remember that period? Please, do we remember? Has anyone bought from Amazon before?
Yes, please.
So how do you get your items delivered? When you buy from Amazon, how do your items get delivered to you?
They're usually sent through the post or through the courier services to be delivered.
Okay, so previously they were not using the post at all. Previously they were not using Ghana Post.
No.
You always have to use a third party. So they can't ship the item directly to you in Ghana via any courier service.
They can ship it to you directly if you're in Ghana. It depends on the item you're buying.
No, but before it was not so.
Previously, it wasn't possible.
Previously, it was not possible.
Somebody
have to ship it to a foreign address.
Address in the US, it goes to the person will send it back.
Good. So that was how business models like the Aramex business model came about, where they have specific addresses in countries that you can send your packages to, and then they will receive it in that country on your behalf and bring it to you in Ghana. You see, so even though the technology and virtual component enables them to do simultaneous expansion, not all of them enable it, right? But currently, a number of firms enable it. So you can be able to buy from Amazon, depending on the product you're buying, they'll send it to you directly in Ghana. There are other sites too that do the same thing. You can buy from ASOS and then you give your Ghanaian address, they'll send it to you directly in Ghana because they work with courier services like Amazon, with like Aramex, who are familiar with the Ghanaian addressing system and the Ghanaian climate. So when you buy from them, you'll just give it to Aramex and Aramex will bring it to you at your Ghanaian address. Right? So let's look specifically at the approaches that we are talking about now. So incremental versus simultaneous entry. Like we have already established, it assumes that initially a product or a technology may be so new or expensive that only the advanced wealthy countries can use it or afford it. And that's exactly how Amazon started. Amazon was incremental. It was only possible to buy books online in the US, in the UK, because they were the advanced people who had the level of technology and addressing system and infrastructure to facilitate that level of service delivery. So it made sense for Amazon to start in the US and the UK, and it took them all those years before they started delivering to us in Ghana. And that is a typical characteristic of the incremental approach. But over time, however, the price will fall, the technology will become rife, and it will become inexpensive enough for people in developing and less developed countries to also buy it. And that is exactly what has happened. Before, internet penetration was not that high in our part of the world. So even the infrastructure to facilitate that kind of e-commerce was not available in our context. But when the internet penetration increased over time, and people now had more access to the internet and could use these services, it became possible for e-commerce sites like Amazon to ship directly to buyers in Ghana and also process payments, among other things. So consequently, following this approach, a firm may decide to enter international markets on an incremental basis or an experimental basis, depending on how successful they are in the initial markets that they enter. It will determine how well they can be able to enter subsequent markets. And we have seen that with a number of organizations, including Lancaster, using Ghana as a starting point and then expanding into other countries. And then again, Amazon, who started first in the US and the UK and the more developed countries, then slowly expanded to Africa. So alternatively, apart from the incremental, we are saying that they could decide to enter simultaneously, and that involves entering several markets at the same time. And you are able to use the competencies that you have as an organization to facilitate this simultaneous entry, because we need to bear in mind that all these markets may not have the same or similar market segments. So you would need to do a lot of resource commitment in the different markets to be able to ensure that you can effectively handle operations in all these different markets at the same time. So most of the time, firms prefer to use the incremental approach to entering markets because it gives them more of an opportunity to learn and gain experience and knowledge about international marketing operations before they expand further into other markets. So these are diagrams that represent the waterfall approach and the shower approach, also known as the incremental and simultaneous approach. And here we can see that under the waterfall approach, just like the models we have talked about with Amazon and Lancaster, they start from more advanced countries and then they trickle down into developing and less developed countries, depending on the level of experience that they have gained and how over time these countries have found themselves in a position where they can facilitate the level of infrastructure and processes that are required for the product or service to be effectively marketed and sold within their market. Yes, Saliu, please come in.
Yeah, Doc, I was going to add that if firms are going to take the shower approach, sometimes they are able to do that through either acquisitions or mergers.
Good.
So when MTN bought the former space phone Ariba,
yeah,
Ariba had operations in West Africa and then the Middle East.
Good.
So as MTN acquired them, they started operating automatically in West Africa and then the Middle East.
Good. That's an excellent example. So we realized that the choice of a shower approach where they want to operate in multiple countries at a time led them to choose a particular entry mode, which was in this case mergers and acquisitions. So we'll find out in our next session, in our next two sessions, when we are discussing entry modes, that it is very important to know the approach that you are using to be able to determine the specific entry mode that you will use to facilitate that approach. And in this case, Saliu has given us a prime example of how MTN used mergers and acquisitions to support their shower approach of global marketing. So thank you for that example, Saliu. All right. So what are the benefits of the incremental approach? One, entry on an incremental basis, especially into small markets, may be preferred where a firm lacks experience. So like we learned earlier, when it comes to firm characteristics, you need to look at your competencies, especially with regard to your experience in internationalization, and let that inform the approach that you choose to expand. And in this case, the incremental approach is best because you can start small from where you are comfortable or start from where you have more experience and are guaranteed to get enough returns to be able to learn enough and earn enough to expand further into larger markets. And we can also talk about the fact that it is preferable to use the incremental approach if a company is entering an international market late and faces entrenched local competition, because you do not want to go all in at once without enough experience and knowledge to go and face competition who are very experienced and knowledgeable about the content that you are seeking to operate in. So it's better to go incrementally to ensure that you learn enough about the competition, the structure of the environment, as well as the nature of operations in that market to ensure that you are in a better position to compete. And the incremental approach is also beneficial for those firms who are small and have limited resources to be able to spend, because like we realized, the shower approach comes with a high resource commitment where you have to spend a lot to make sure that you are in a good position to compete in all these multiple markets at the same time. So if you're a small firm with limited resources and you are also fairly averse to risk, you have to make sure that you choose an incremental approach that will reduce the level of risk that you are committing to help you gain more knowledge, to make you more confident before you enter into larger markets that are more diversified and will require higher levels of resource commitment and ultimately come with more risk. However, the simultaneous entry also has its benefits. For example, for certain companies that prefer rapid entry in order to seize emerging opportunities in multiple countries at the same time or multiple locations at the same time, have to use a simultaneous approach, because that is the one that gives them the best chance of grabbing all the opportunities they have identified in all these different markets. And once they are able to enter using this rapid approach, they can be able to penetrate the market quickly and take up what sources of competitive advantage there are before other competitors come in to the market. And by virtue of operating simultaneously in various markets, they are able to garner a lot of experience because they learn from doing business in all these different markets at the same time. And depending on the resources that they have at their disposal in these various markets and the knowledge that they gain, they can be able to achieve opportunities such as economies of scale in production and marketing by integrating and consolidating their operations across these countries. So we realize that firms operate in multiple countries at the same time. However, they decide to situate their production and manufacturing facility in one particular country, which offers them economies of scale in terms of the production and the cost of raw material, and then produce from there and then send to their sales subsidiaries in other countries for sale. And that is a typical example of consolidating their operations across markets to make sure that they get the optimal returns. But we need to appreciate the fact that a simultaneous entry typically requires substantial financial and management resources, as well as high levels of operating risk. Godwin, please come in.
Yeah, so Doc, please, what would you say the approach of franchises are?
Franchises are more incremental.
They're more incremental, okay.
Yes,
okay.
Because rather than coming to set up shop in the country where they are not very sure how operations will go, they'll rather sell a franchise to someone who is already in that country to operate in their name, and then they can still make their returns. So it's a more risk-averse approach, which is characteristic of the incremental market entry strategy. Anne, please come in. Thank you, Godwin, for that question.
Hi, Doc. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Anne.
So I would like to find out, with APSA,
yeah,
they launched in Ghana this year, but then before they launched in other African countries.
Yes.
So it was mostly done this year and then like in different months.
Good.
So does that mean was that the SHAR approach, or that was incremental? Because I'm trying
incremental, because APSA has been operating in other countries long before, right?
Yes, but they were mainly in it's South Africa, and
Good.
then
and you saw how they entered Ghana.
Yes.
Through what?
Barclays.
Through the acquisition of Barclays.
Yes, but then they acquired the what you call it, Barclays in other countries too.
Good.
So is
the whole of Africa.
Yes, so the whole of Africa.
Good.
So is so that, will that be the SHAR approach, or
because I will call it incremental because they were in limited places before, right?
Yes.
But,
and then
they just jumped out straight out. Because
yes.
And Barclays sold out their shares in Africa to them. It's like they just took over.
They just took over everywhere at the same time. Just that they were launched at different.
But before they took over Barclays, that put them everywhere in Africa. They were operating in some isolated locations. True or false?
True.
Yes, but we don't know if they had the international plans anyway.
That is it. So perhaps their international plan was to acquire Barclays and use that to simultaneously expand to plenty places at a time.
Yeah, maybe.
You get it? So what we are noticing here is that the expansion strategy can be a combination of both.
Okay.
They can decide to enter one market incrementally and decide in one particular region, and then in another region decide to do a simultaneous approach. Do you get it?
Yes, please. And I think that even as they've taken over Barclays, they will probably be looking at other countries that Barclays are not
good.
But because they can make more money, they sort of will expand there.
Exactly. You see? So perhaps they are using a simultaneous strategy within an incremental strategy.
Yeah.
So can you give us like a typical example of the SHAR approach? Because if there's an organization that let's say okay, can we use like an indigenous organization here? Let's say
that's the one that has gone international.
I think Salihu gave MTN as an example for that.
But then MTN was operating somewhere else. So if they move, that will be incremental.
Yeah.
We are trying to find one for the SHAR approach. So that
he said that the because it was an acquisition, it's like sort of internationalizing broadly all over. So it was like a shower approach rather than an incremental for the
Then that
MTN.
means, so then that means APSA 2 is a shower approach if we are going to use that, no?
That's why Doc is saying that the APSA is sort of a mix, something like that. She'll clarify.
Mix because
APSA was in Africa already. That's why.
in which locations? The
APSA was in South Africa.
SA.
So SA is one country, right?
And so from there,
good. So the first time they stepped out of SA, how did they do it?
Through an acquisition.
Yeah. The acquisition of
backlinks.
Then it's a shower approach.
And it's a shower.
Okay.
So shower, the approach is determined from how you step out of your home country.
Okay.
Okay. So if their first step out of the home country was to acquire backlinks and be all over Africa, it's shower because they stepped out by going to multiple locations at a time.
All right. Okay, sure. Then I
Yes,
get it.
but so, madam, then we can say that. So APSA is shower, right? But let's say Stambik, FNB, they would be more like the waterfall.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Because they took their time and went step by step.
Okay.
Hello, madam.
Yes, Chief.
Hello, madam.
Yes, Chief. Please go ahead.
I want to understand what you're saying too. Okay, let's take a company like Adidas.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't go international. They were a local company.
Yes.
And they partnered OIC,
yes.
International Olympic Organization. And because of that partnership, they started selling to almost every country, because most of the countries were at IOC.
Yes.
IOC, I mean, International Olympic
Organization.
Olympic Organization. Will you therefore say that one will be a shower approach?
Yes, I'll call it a shower approach. I'll call that
will be a shower approach, eh?
Yes, because they started selling to multiple countries at the same time. And they used their network.
Exactly.
They use the OIC network, yeah. Okay. So it's simultaneous.
All right.
Thank you for that example, Chief. And your hand is still up. Please, do you have something you want to add?
No, sorry, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, Della, are you coming in? Or you're good?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. So to wrap up with the simultaneous entry, I was saying that one involves substantial financial and management resources as well as high operating risk. So you have to be able to have a good plan to be able to do that. And we've learned from the examples that we've given right now that to be able to control the level of risk that they are going into and to manage the financial and management resources involved, a number of those companies that we have identified who use the simultaneous entry approach did so through acquisitions. So with the acquisition, you have the financial resources, but once you acquire the company, you are acquiring the company plus its staff, which gives you the management resources you need to do the expansion. And then you control some of the risks because the staff who have already been operating in these countries have fair knowledge of how operations within these countries that you're expanding into are operating. So by acquiring them, you already have a leg up, which tends to minimize the level of risk that you are undertaking by using this approach to enter the market. So that is it for the simultaneous entry. Now, besides simultaneous entry and incremental entry, the firm also has to decide whether they are going to concentrate their international marketing efforts or they will diversify. So here we are saying that the firms must decide whether they're going to concentrate their resources on a limited number of similar markets or they will diversify across several different markets. So in as much as you are even using the shower approach, are you showering across diverse markets that do not share any similarities at all, or you are showering across markets that share certain similarities? So a company may decide, for instance, to concentrate its efforts by entering countries that are highly similar, perhaps in terms of the market characteristics or in terms of the level of infrastructure, right, within the domestic market. Or alternatively, they can prefer to diversify their risk by entering countries that differ in terms of the market structure, the environment, among other things. So you need to be able to decide how you want to approach the segmentation and entry process, be it from the perspective of concentration or diversification. Now, diversification has a number of benefits. For instance, if an economic recession takes place in one country, because of the diversified approach with which you approach them, perhaps you chose countries that had different levels of economic development and stability. So in case a recession happens in one country, you can balance it with the growth in another country, because we've heard of recessions in other parts of the world, but technically not everybody in every part of the world felt the recession the same way. So by diversifying your interests, in case there's an economic recession in one country is hard hit, you can be able to counterbalance the poor performance in that country as a result of the recession with the buoyancy of your operations in other countries that are not suffering so much from that recession. Now, we also realize that through diversification, you can be able to benefit from the varying levels of competition that exists in the various countries that you are operating in, because the strength of competition in one country perhaps may be lower than the level of competition in another country. So you will be able to grasp profits that are relatively unprotected in markets that are less competitive, and then you can use that to funnel your operations and help you to compete more fiercely in those markets where the competition is intense and high. And also through the diversification approach, you can be able to diversify your risk. Like I said, in the event that there's a recession in one country and other countries are not feeling the recession so much, if you are operating in both kinds of countries, you can be able to offset the losses that you are likely to incur in the country that is hard hit by the recession with the benefits that you will make from the country that is not so hard hit. And through this diversification, you are avoiding the risk of having to rely solely on the resources and the outcomes and the returns from one country. Because if you are operating in countries in different regions, for instance, the markets in these different regions may not be interdependent. So whatever trend is taking place in one region, be it high levels of inflation or changes in consumer tastes and preferences, may not necessarily spill over to your operations in other markets. So that will make it easy for you to be able to offset the different challenges that you face in one market with the other market's operations. So in a nutshell, these are the various factors that you can consider, which will favor either a diversification strategy or a concentration strategy when you are deciding on how to enter a market. And they can be considered with regard to four main segments. The first segment being the company factors. And the nature of the factors in your company will determine whether or not you go for a diversification approach or a concentration approach. So for instance, if your company has high management risk consciousness, meaning that they are not averse to risk, you can decide to go for a diversification approach. However, if your management is averse to risk taking, you should be able to focus more on a concentration approach so that it can allay their fears with regards to the level of risk that you are taking, right? Also, if you have limited market knowledge at your firm about the markets that you are entering into, it's in your best interest to diversify, so that in the event that what you don't know about one market hurts you, you can be able to benefit from perhaps how well you are doing in other markets to offset that issue. However, if you have the ability to pick the best markets and you are very reliably informed about how good these markets are and how well they can do, you can go for a concentration approach where you just concentrate on the markets that you know will do excellently well and then earn your returns there. After that, we can move to the section on product factors, where you need to consider the factors of the specific product that you are trying to sell, right? That's it. If your product has limited specialist uses, like certain products are used by specific professionals, or they are used by certain specialists in certain fields, you can't afford to have a concentration strategy, because that means that you are limiting the number of people who you have access to and can sell your products to. So the more diversified your market entry strategy, the better, because it means that you have access to more of these specialists in a larger pool of international markets that you can sell your products to. But if these products have general uses, even if you use a concentration strategy, you'll still be able to sell to as many people as you need to do to be able to earn your returns. among other things that have been stated in the product factors. I believe that once you get the slides, you'll be able to take your time and go through each of these one after the other. We can also talk about market factors, and there are a myriad of them, including the growth rates in each market, the similarity of the market, as well as the level of stability within the market. It only makes sense that if you see that the markets that you're trying to operate in are unstable, you diversify your interests, so that in the event that one market collapses, you can fall on the other market. However, if the markets that you're choosing to operate in are fairly stable, then you can decide to concentrate on a number or a few of them, and then grow your interest in those markets, because you can fairly rely on the stability within those markets to guarantee your returns. And then finally, with regard to marketing factors, we can talk about things like communication costs for additional markets, as well as the order handling costs for additional markets. Sometimes if you diversify your interest and you serve several markets, especially in diversified locations, it becomes difficult to handle their orders, because you have to work out different means and distribution channels to make sure that the final product gets to the consumer, which may incur high level of costs. So if your order handling costs are low, you can freely go ahead for a diversification approach, because then serving all the different customers in these different diversified markets, perhaps over various geographic regions, will not hurt your pocket so much. But if you have high order handling costs for additional markets, you need to be able to concentrate your efforts so that you do not expend so much of your resources handling orders, such that you eat into your profits. So among other things, we can see that several factors that have been listed under company factors, product factors, market factors, and marketing factors all go a long way to determine whether a firm decides to use a diversification approach or a concentration approach. And on that note, we've come to the end of our session for today. I don't know if anyone has anything they want to ask or anything that they need clarification on. You can please go ahead and share it before we sign off for the day.
Well, Doc, just want to say thank you and well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Lucy, please go ahead.
Doc, please, I wanted to find out, there's sprinkler, the sprinkler, is it the same as the shower approach? Because
yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Lucy.
Thank you for the lecture.
Okay. Ivy, your hand was up. Oh, you're okay?
Yes, Doc, please, I'm okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So on that note, please, we've come to the end of our session.